Hi, welcome to MCOC's Story Time tonight with Sabreen Tuku. My name is Adasha Turner. I am one of the chair of the MAPS Community on Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. I will be moderating and introducing our resident youth this evening who will be reading I Am Enough. I'd like to introduce Sabreen Tuku. She is a high school senior focusing on organizing around climate justice and Black Lives Matter movements. Sabreen is a climate and social justice advocate who has been organizing youth climate justice activities around Washington and to bring awareness around everyday Muslims within our community. She works with MAPS Amen, as well educating on the intersectionalities of the climate crisis and the ways that we need systematic change for our future. Sabreen is also a co-founder of Say Her Name, Protect Black Women, a community organization that celebrates the legacy of Black women. Please, let's welcome Sabreen as we do our story time. I Am Enough. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I am Sabreen, and today I will be reading I Am Enough by Grace Byers. Like the sun, I'm here to shine. Like the voice, I'm here to sing. Like the bird, I'm here to fly and soar high over everything. Like the trees, I'm here to grow. Like the mountains, here to stand. Like time, I'm here to be and be everything I can. Like the champ, I'm here to fight. Like the heart, I'm here to love. Like a ladder, here to climb, and like the air, to rise above. Like the wind, I'm here to push. Like a rope, I'm here to pull. Like the rain, I'm here to pour and drip and fall until I'm full. Like the moon, I'm here to dream. Like the student, here to learn. Like the water, here to swell. Like the fire, here to burn. Like the winner, I'm here to win, and if I don't, get up again. I know that I may sometimes cry, but even then, I'm here to try. I'm not meant to be like you. You're not meant to be like me. Sometimes we will get along, and sometimes we will disagree. I know that we don't look the same, our skin, our eyes, our hair, our frame. But that does not dictate our worth. We both have places here on earth. And in the end, we are right here to live a life of love, not fear. To help each other when it's tough, to say together, I am enough. So, as Adasha said before, I do a lot within the community, and I wanted to read this book as the first thing that we go into Black History Month with MCOC to make sure that we understand that we are enough and we understand how to treat people like they are enough. I know a lot of the time it is hard to stand up and speak for ourselves when we feel like people aren't listening to us or we feel like they don't like us for whatever reason. And so I want to make sure that as we're going into Black History Month, we make sure that our Black brothers and sisters feel welcome in our community. And some of the things that we can do to make sure that make sure everybody feels welcome is to make sure that when we are hanging out with people, we aren't only playing or speaking or talking to people who look only like us. To make sure that when we are hanging out with people, we're speaking a language that everybody understands. Because when we don't, a lot of the time it makes us feel like we aren't welcome because I don't know what you're saying. I don't know if you're talking about me. I don't know if you're saying a joke. I'm not included because I don't understand what's going on. And we want to make sure that everybody feels welcome. We also want to make sure that we never say or believe that someone who doesn't look like us or speak the same languages as us aren't as good people or aren't as good Muslims. We want to make sure that we're always welcoming people and we're always making sure that they feel like they belong around us. We also want to make sure that we never say somebody isn't as smart, isn't as brave, isn't as nice, or isn't as pretty as us just because they are of darker skin or because they don't speak the same language as us or because they have curlier hair or a bigger nose or bigger eyes. We want to make sure that we're always treating people like they are enough, that they're smart enough and pretty enough and brave enough and kind enough, and that they're worth our time and worth our friendship. And even if we aren't doing these things, we want to make sure that if we see somebody else being rude, that we know how to tell them to stop. And we know how to make sure that everybody's feeling comfortable, um, no matter what the situation is. So if you hear somebody calling a Black friend a certain word that they shouldn't, make sure to tell them and make sure to be nice and compassionate about it, but don't let it just happen because we want to make sure that people feel welcome in our community. We want to make sure that they can come to the masjid and they can pray with us and they can talk with us. Or at school, we want to make sure that people can work with us on our math problems or can hang out with us on the monkey bars during recess. Um, we want to make sure that everybody feels like they are enough because they are. They are more than enough because everyone is beautiful and everyone is smart. And as we know in our ummah, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he treated everybody the same. It didn't matter if you were Arab or non-Arab. It didn't matter if you were black or white. You were treated the same. If you in his eyes, because we all are the same. In the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are all equal. And as long as we are not on the basis of our race, we are equal on the way we treat others, we are equal in the way that we communicate with each other, and we're equal in the way that we make sure everybody feels like they are enough. Um, so just as a precursor to Black History Month, as we start off, and you have 3 amazing authors reading to you guys the next couple of weeks, we want to make sure that everybody feels like they are smart enough and strong enough and brave enough. And when they need to, they can feel sad, they can feel happy, they can jump and play around with anyone and everyone around them. Because regardless of our race or our gender or our ethnicity or our religion, we are all equal. And we need to make sure that everybody is being treated just like they are, that we are all equal because we are. So yeah, that's my little spiel. If Adasha wants to add anything, or if Noni wants to add anything, or if anyone has any questions, please send them in. But yeah.
Awesome, amazing. I'm always in awe when I hear you speak. You just come with so much knowledge and depth, as a young person and really seeing these things and being able to connect. When you so you had a choice, on which book you were going to read. What stuck out to you about this book to where you wanted to share?
I kind of narrowed it down to 3 books. And the top 2 were one about Harriet Tubman and then I Am Enough. And I picked I Am Enough just because at the end of the day, it can be really hard to feel like you are enough. And like still to this day, and in people older than we, it's hard to feel like you are smart enough and beautiful enough and brave enough and courageous enough and compassionate enough when you aren't always told that, or people don't treat you like you are enough. So when people say, oh, because her hair is curly, she isn't beautiful enough, or because her skin is darker, she isn't beautiful enough, or because she doesn't speak Arabic, she isn't Muslim enough, or because she looks a certain way, there's no way she can be smart. There's no way that she can be articulate. There's no way that she can hold a conversation with me about something where she won't get mad or angry. When you're told these things enough, you begin to believe them. And I wanted to make sure that starting off Black History Month, we all feel like we're enough, regardless of what other people are telling us. Because we're all beautiful, we're all incredibly smart, we're all creative and courageous, and we should be able to feel like we are, and we should be told that we are.
Yes, definitely. And I think as a young climate activist, not only are you having to be enough, you're having to be, that much more on a topic that's so um, not as controversial as it used to be, but thanks to a lot of the awareness, and kind of the inevitable that's been happening. But how do you see you standing firm in your beliefs and you being really confident in who you are? How is that projected in your work when you're fighting, for something that is just it's almost groundbreaking at this point, so you're just really having to make a way.
Right. At first, I wasn't, to be completely honest. At first, I let people walk over me and I let them tell me what to say and what to believe and what to speak about because I wanted to please other people and I wanted to make sure that I was being backed up in whatever I was doing. Soon, that became very difficult because as I grew and as I learned, I realized that I don't share a lot of the same beliefs as what people were telling me.
Mm.
Um, for example, I don't think that a Green New Deal is going to save us. There's a lot more that goes into it. I don't think that me using a reusable water bottle every day is going to save all the turtles
It's
because
very
there's a
hard.
lot more to it. There's intersectionality with it. We have to look at the crisis in its entirety. But honestly, it took seeing other Muslims and other Black people in these organizing spaces for me to feel like, oh, I can actually speak up. I can
Mm.
actually say what I believe. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened over a long time because I didn't have that support system from the get-go because I live on the east side, predominantly white area. There aren't many people of color or Muslims of color in the organizing, specifically climate organizing realm. But as I learned more about myself and I learned more about Black history and I learned more about Islam and I learned more about the people in my life who have always been unapologetically themselves and every aspect of the word unapologetic, um, I began to understand that I am enough. But I also understand that you're not always going to feel 100%. There are going to be days where you're just sad, or days where you just aren't as happy as you were 2 weeks ago, or times where just you don't want to talk to a bunch of people or you don't want to do a bunch of organizing where you kind of just want to sit in bed and hang out with your friends. So making sure that I knew that I am enough, but me being enough didn't mean I was always 100%. It meant taking some time and taking some breaks for me and understanding where I fit in and when I feel the strongest to help other people.
Yeah, no, that's very important self-care when you're out there doing the work. It is definitely exhausting. So that's one piece of advice you've already taken heed to. A lot of people, they just kind of keep going until they can't. And so I would definitely say that, make time for you, make your fight, your fight, but still, you have to preserve yourself as well in the meantime.
Right.
On something as huge as climate, because it's going to take a lot of energy and effort, to keep the momentum going. Um, so I know there's a lot of different organizations and different community members coming together during this pandemic, to really be grassroots and boots on the grounds to a lot of amazing work. Food justice being one of them, climate being another. How do you see um, kind of that being enough in this moment, when there's large groups getting together, but then there's also large groups that are really feeling isolated. So when you're talking about tapping into, self-preservation, understanding that balance is huge. Just speaking to the youth that are out there, that are looking for something to do. How do you have any words of wisdom for them, on getting involved and staying relevant?
Right. Um, the one thing for me was finding what you're passionate about and what makes you the most angry. So whatever really like just boils your blood, and when you think about it, you're like, oh, why did that exist? How can I change that? How can I fix that? What can I do? Who can I work with? I'd say that's the first step, because burnout is really easy when you are organizing in something you don't care that much about or you aren't that passionate about. So that's like the same thing with school, right? Like,
Right.
I hated art class. I did not enjoy it at all. So all my projects would be terrible. But I really loved music, which was different at my school. Like, I really loved music, and I really loved history, and I really loved English. So I was doing great in those classes because I actually cared about what I was doing and I enjoyed it. But when it came to art and making a painting or a sculpture, I was like, nah, it's not for me. I don't enjoy it. I don't want to do it. So making sure that you're working in something that you really enjoy and makes you really passionate. And that's not always organizing. Sometimes that's helping out your friends. Sometimes it's helping out your mom. Sometimes it's writing. Sometimes it's going to the masjid and helping distribute food or donate some clothes. Or you love sports, so it just might be kicking around a soccer ball outside or throwing a football with your family and friends. In general, it's about finding what you're passionate about and then finding the people that are going to be there to support you and the groups that you feel you can align yourself with. Um, because it can, like, when you're on a team, you have to make sure you trust the other people on the team with you. You want to make sure that you're comfortable around them, that if you fall, they'll be right there to bring you back up. If you're not having the best day, they'll be there to send you a text or to give you a hug and to be there for you. Um, like the same way you would at like I know at MAPS we used to, I think we still do have MAPS juniors. When you do those relay games, you want to make sure your team has your back. They're cheering on for you while you're running back with the baton or whatever you're trying to exchange at the point. Um, so you want to make sure you have that same thing in your organizing or whatever you're doing in life. Make sure that you're passionate about it and make sure that you have people that'll be there to support you. And most importantly, I think, is making sure that you stand for the same things that they do.
Right.
So if you are, what's, again, trying to find a good example that isn't controversial. Um,
Ooh.
let's take, okay, climate, for example. If you're working with an organization that doesn't believe climate change exists, but you're trying to combat climate change, you're gonna clash. It's not gonna work. You're not gonna feel welcomed, and you're not gonna be able to do the thing that you're passionate about. But if you are working with a group that does believe climate is an issue, does believe that policies need to be passed, does believe that we need to work together with grassroots organizations and not solely depending on one person or one government, then you're going to be able to flourish in what you do.
And how long did it take you to find those groups? Because I know, like, people, they're very passionate and they go out and, they hit a brick wall, or they find that, that they've done all this work to get into an organization to find out that their goals or their kind of in game doesn't meet up,
Mhm.
how, I'm just kind of trying to speak to the tune of, you're gonna run into some walls and you need to, keep going and you need to keep searching.
Mhm.
But how long did it take for you to find, or just kind of some, again, words of encouragement for youth getting out there and speaking and sticking to their passions?
Right. I mean, I think for me, it was, I mean, to an extent, you're always going to be looking and longing for that group because you're always changing and you're evolving, and your interests and your desires and your priorities change as you do. Um, but I started organizing in seventh grade and I didn't feel completely welcome into a space until 11th grade, which
Wow.
isn't meant to be discouraging. But for me, it was because I was still trying to figure out who and what I stood for. Making sure that I am welcome in everything that I am, as a Muslim, as a Black person, as a woman, as someone who has more leftist leaning belief in politics. It just took a little extra time because I didn't know who to reach out to. And I also wasn't very willing to reach out to people because I felt that it was, in a way, a sign of weakness. That if I'm reaching out to you because I'm stuck and I don't know what to do, it's because I'm not good enough. Which is completely wrong. Don't do that. You are more than enough, and reaching out is a sign of bravery and courage because you're saying you're okay with being vulnerable enough where you can ask for help, and that help will eventually help you. So it wasn't until I reached out to people and I asked for help that I really found the spaces that I felt the most welcome in. So don't do what I did, but making sure you're having that support system. Like, you can reach out to me if you'd like, and I'd love to help you find a space that you feel welcome in. I know Doha would do the same, Adasha would do the same. There's so many people and like big sisters in the community that you can reach out to and ask for help that'd be willing to be there for you.
I had a question. In the book, you had spoke to, yes, I am enough, but you also, the book spoke to appreciating the differences, amongst people. So I'm wondering if kind of that hesitation or that stumbling block at the beginning to reaching out had to do with representation. Were you looking for, not only like-minded people, but people that were, like look like you, that were trying to do the same thing, coming from a different type of background? Like, how does representation play a part in, advocacy for you?
Right, 100%. I like just like this memory that I was writing about for my college app was Obama's inauguration. Because looking back at the day, I didn't feel empowered. I didn't feel like this great whoosh of, oh great, I can do whatever I want now. I'm welcome. Granted, I was like 6, so those aren't always the memories going through your head, but looking back and reflecting on it, although there was a lot that I didn't agree with in the Obama administration, having Barack and Michelle Obama in office did change me a lot. And at first I didn't realize it because I was like, they're there. And then they were there from like ages 6 to 14. And then all of a sudden Trump was there. But really recognizing that, seeing them in office and having people say, hey, you can be like Obama one day, or you can be like Michelle one day, you can go to the best law schools and you can run for office and you can make a change. It helped because I felt like I wasn't as alone, because it's very daunting to be the first person to ever do something, right? It's like when you're the only Muslim in the class or the only person of color in the classroom.
Especially in 2020,
Yeah, especially in 2020.
Like, okay.
Somebody says something about 9/11, or somebody says something about slavery, or they mention some random Black artist who did something and everybody's looking at you all of a sudden. It's hard because you're the only person in there and you don't always have the tools or the resources to speak up about it. But when I was going into these organizing spaces, I was so focused on making sure that I was representing a Black Muslim that people wouldn't think wasn't educated or was oppressed, that it took me a lot of time to recognize the beauty of other people's diversity and how their stories help you understand your own story as well. Because it might feel like, with everybody telling you, oh, you're so brave, you're so strong for everything you do, being Muslim, being a person of color, being a woman, and then never taking the time to recognize that there are other people who are struggling as well. Not because they have the exact same story as you, nobody will, but because they are a dreamer. Right. And they are scared of being kicked out of the country for seeking asylum as a child, or without that being their choice. It was their parents trying to do what was best for them, or friends who lived in refugee camps for a portion of their life, or friends who didn't speak English as their first language at home. So when they went into school, it was really difficult for them to adjust. But all those stories, they help you understand who you are and how vast and grand and beautiful the world is at the same time. Because you're stepping out of your bubble and your comfort zone, and you're understanding and you're recognizing and you're comprehending more than you. You're you're seeing that we know that the universe is vast, and we know that not everything revolves around us. But when you're in your own little bubble for so long, you're so used to only having to answer and understand yourself. But when you're in spaces where you recognize and appreciate and amplify these stories of diversity, you are walking into such a beautiful world of compassion and culture and just beautiful stories that you can't understand because they're not yours, but you can appreciate.
So my question to you is, now, especially over the last year, we've just seen like an ample amount of, representation in the literature, itself. And I know you come from like a really good background and you're very well read. But how important is it to have that diversity in the literature in the schools, so you're not learning about these stories or the depth of the trauma afterwards? Like, how important is it to being able to connect and have that those resources available, in school? Do you think it would have made a difference to kind of Allahu alam, but just having it there for the youth and the next generation? Can you speak to that? Books like I Am Enough.
I don't remember. In elementary school, I went to an elementary school that it really exposed us to different cultures and concepts that many kids didn't have the resources for. Because I was learning about slavery in third grade. I was learning about the Holocaust in second grade. I was learning about Japanese internment camps in like kindergarten. So I was granted all these incredible stories, and I was gifted with them, and I was taught them, and I was, like little ways of analyzing them. I was told how to do that and how to understand. And then I went to middle school and all those resources were gone. I never read any stories by people of color. All my history classes were focused on Aristotle and Socrates and George Washington. When we did hear about Black history, it was MLK, a little bit of Malcolm X because he's a little too radical for some people, Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman, and then you never hear anything about Muslims. So then it was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't know where to get these resources. I don't know who to ask. I don't know who to talk to, but I want to understand these stories. I want to get them. I want to be able to understand them so that I'm not blind to the struggle of other people. But again, I didn't really have that many resources, so I kind of forgot about it. Because again, I was like, it was sixth grade. I wasn't thinking that deep into it. Right. Other than like the 1 month that you do because the school year started and you're trying to figure out what to do. But then one of my cousins was like, hey, you should read the Autobiography of Malcolm X. And I was like, oh, okay, why not? It was mainly because I didn't know who Malcolm X was. Like I was at her house and there was a poster of Malcolm X on her wall. And I was like, oh, who's that? And she scolded me for it a little bit. And she just told me to read it. So some vacation I went and I read it. And it was the first time I read a story that I felt like I could relate to, but I also could also learn from. Because my story isn't the same of that was Malcolm X's. We aren't the same people. We don't come from the same backgrounds. Yes, we're both Black and Muslim, but we're our own individuals because we're allowed to live and understand life outside of those two things that we use to identify ourselves. But it was just so mind-opening because it was the first time I'd ever seen a Muslim in power outside of like the masjid. And it was the first time I could read about a Black person who was just had so much power and was so articulate and analyzed everything to the T and used their voice to speak out against injustice and didn't shy down. Malcolm X was up there. Right. Like, mashallah, he didn't let anybody tell him what to say. He said what he wanted to say and how he felt, and he didn't apologize for it. And it was just so inspiring to read because I was like, whoa, these people exist. And they're not like white saviors in a TV show on Disney Channel. So having that literature is incredibly important, because if you're not able to read other people's stories or be able to see some form of reflection of your own story, you're going to feel like you're alone, or like your story isn't worth being told. People don't care about you like that. Or that your friend's story isn't worth being told, and then people don't care about them like that. And it becomes very difficult to try and understand yourself in a place where you are the minority if you continuously see and are told you're the minority, because there's no stories that reflect you authentically.
Right.
But yeah.
And you are one of a kind authentic. I remember seeing you, I believe last year, when you did a talk on climate now, at the masjid, and you were very passionate in your research, and even diving into the disproportionate options that people of lower income or middle class even would suffer through climate change, things that people don't really understand. I mean, you had the statistics down. What made you really get into climate change and climate activism?
Kind of a sad story, but this group was interested in me because of the different narrative I could bring, being Black and Muslim. And so I worked with them, I joined with them. Their focus was sustainability, and they did a lot of amazing work. I just didn't feel any connection to it. And I felt like I had to stay, because if I left, there would be no Black people or Muslims who could be there to share their stories and their voices. And so I felt like I had to stay, and I did for a long time, until it got to the point where I felt no connection to the work that they were doing, because I didn't feel like it was representing me, and I didn't feel that burn like I do now with climate, or with the Black Lives Matter movement, or the Say Her Name movement. So once I finally left that, I was like, they're still doing a lot of amazing stuff. How about I implement some of their practices into the masjid? Because at the time, alhamdulillah, thanks to MAPS Youth and all the amazing things that Ahsan Nadeem has done for us, every week I'd be at the masjid. Every Friday night, I'd be at the masjid with my friends. We'd have a youth event where we'd have a discussion, or we'd make sandwiches and then we distribute them to the homeless. And I was there so much that I was like, I might as well try and implement some of these practices here. So I brought in, with the help of Brother Hazem, we brought in these compost and recycling bins into the masjid, and we put up these posters about, hey, this is what goes where. And during Ramadan, we had Girl Scouts and had other youth people at the garbage stations directing people what goes where, especially because it's Ramadan. A bunch of people are at the masjid for iftar, and then they're there all night. So I did all these things, and because of the work I was doing at MAPS, I just got other opportunities from people who were at the masjid or had ties to the masjid. And I was invited to go to this conference, and my mom and I went, and it was Reverend Barber III. He is this amazing civil rights activist, does such amazing work, and he spoke to environmental racism. And it was the first time that it had been explained to me, and I could really see the connection between things that happened in Katrina, where Black families weren't given as many resources to build their communities back up again as their white counterparts, even though they were hit the hardest by the hurricane. Or understanding that the environmental justice movement and the civil rights movement have been intertwined since the get-go, when rich white men in North Carolina were letting oil spill into poor Black communities. And then those Black communities were like, nah, you're not going to do that. We're going to stand up against it. So it was which I would highly recommend to anyone who wants to get into organizing, or they're just passionate about something. Start in your community, because you don't know how many people are going to be there for you and help you out and just educate you in ways you couldn't even imagine. Like, if I didn't have Varisha was somebody who was out there, who was running for office, or Duha and Aya as older sisters who I could talk to about anything, or Hassan, who had a place for me and my friends to go every week, or Anila, who was just like an incredible a person to look up to and have as a mentor, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I've done and I continue to do. I'm sorry, I feel like I didn't answer your question. I just went in a whole spiral.
No, it's okay, because it's definitely necessary to recognize the people, who inspire you, and it's nice for other youth to be able to look for those people within their community, and know that support can be delivered outside of the home.
Yeah, and also, but in the home, your parents and your siblings and your grandparents and your aunts and uncles, they are there for you. I know sometimes it feels like, oh, how can they understand my struggle? They didn't grow up here, or they're not living in the same day and age as I am, or like, or they're just like living in the past, or like we come up with so many excuses for our parents because we feel like they can't understand us. But your parents and your siblings and your grandparents and your aunts and uncles, they want nothing but success for you.
Yes.
They want nothing but for you to be the best person you possibly can be. And I know if I didn't have my mom asking cousins to come and pick me up and drop me off places because she and my dad were working, I wouldn't have been able to do the things that I got to do. Or like my dad constantly saying, like, you're like, my dad was the person who was like, oh no, you're enough. It's like, why are you stressing? You got this, your speech is good, the things that you're saying are fine. So really rely on your parents. They want nothing more than for you to be loved and to succeed and to be the best person, the best Muslim you possibly can be. So just like make sure that you rely on them and you love them and you take care of them and you do things for them. Because there's nobody else living who loves you as much as they do and wants you to succeed as much as they do. So that's just like a little spiel, because inside the home you can get some of the most best like support system that you're gonna find.
Yes, I think both of it, internal and external, has definitely kept you grounded, along your journey, especially on identity. Yeah, but the question was, how did you tie kind of the social justice component to climate change, and kind of how it affects, the communities out there, and having, knowledge in this literature, how everything kind of came together to you to where this is something you knew was going to be like your journey.
Right. I think one thing people assume is that you're going to figure everything out right away. You don't. You're not supposed to figure everything out after listening to one conversation or reading one book or going to one protest. That's not how life works. Things will fit together. Allah's the best of planners, and sometimes it may feel like you just don't know what you're doing, but He will bring you what's best. And alhamdulillah, that's what I got. I started off with reading books by like Angela Davis and James Baldwin and Malcolm X, understanding their stories, understanding racism, understanding capitalism, understanding sexism, figuring out all these isms and what they mean and how they affect us, and then bringing those conversations to my mentors and my big sisters who I could ask questions to and who I could speak with, and having debates with my parents because we just didn't believe the same things, and being able to grow in that, and then eventually bringing that into my activism, because the things you experience outside of your organizing realms are far more important than what you do in your organizing realm, because your organizing is only as good as who you are and what you put into it, and the time and the time you put into your community and the people who are going to be there for you, and in your self-care and everything. But I was able to take the things that I've learned from my community and that conference that really opened my eyes up to environmental racism and how racism is linked to the climate justice movement. Not because the earth and the sun and greenhouse gases hate poor and Black communities and communities of color, but because of what people do when we say that a Black community isn't as valuable as a white one. And because of that, we're going to build these factories that are going to expose them to harmful gases, that lead them to having high rates of cancer, or lead them to having high rates of death before 35. So it was really taking the things I've learned and the people in my life and asking questions, and then bringing them all together to find what I felt was my passion. And you can have more than one passion. Like climate justice is one thing. I also huge advocate for the Black Lives Matter movement. Not huge, but like I support the movement a lot and I try and do what I can for it. And the Say Her Name movement for protecting Black women.
Can you tell us a little bit about that campaign?
Say Her Name, Protect Black Women?
Yes.
I would love to. Okay, so the Say Her Name movement is a movement that was created to make sure that Black women who are at the hands of police brutality and racism and the patriarchy and everything, their voices are still heard. And this summer, one of my mentors and I, Reverend Bianca Davis Lovelace, we were noticing that a lot of the narrative and a lot of the media attention was going towards Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd,
yes,
which was needed. Their stories and their voices needed to be amplified, but we weren't hearing the same for Breonna Taylor.
Yes.
And we still weren't hearing the same for Sandra Bland. And we still weren't hearing the same for all these Black women who had died at the hands of the police or had died at the hands of some form of racism or sexism or both, and the mix of it all. And we decided that we needed to create a space and a protest that was amplifying those voices, that was making sure that Black women are being heard. Like Malcolm X said, Black women are the most unprotected women in America. We are the most neglected women in America. There's so much that Black women go through. Just one thing that this was kind of like the crux of what we were thinking of when creating Say Her Name, was that the whole world will applaud for a Black woman doing something incredible. But the second that she starts drowning in the work, they're like, oh no, she's strong enough, she can get herself up.
Right.
And all the people that are applauding for you are now not there for you, which is something that we can feel at a really young age too, when all your friends leave you because you don't speak the same language and they don't want to speak something that you understand, or when you're told you're not smart because you're Black, or when you're told that because you're Black you're in a gang, or because you're Black you aren't welcome, or because you're Black you aren't Muslim enough. Those are things that we experience in our community as well, but on the greater scale, Black women just aren't as supported. So we wanted to make sure that there was this space where our voices could be shared, our voices could be amplified, our stories told. And we tried doing that, and we had a protest, and it was great, and we plan on making it an annual thing, with more people, inshallah. COVID and more people be vaccinated, and everything will be just better by the time of our next one. But yeah, the whole point was making sure that there was a space where Black women, there's a space for facilitated and targeted towards Black women to appreciate and understand the legacy that Black women have and come together in a healing process. So yeah.
I will definitely put you down for next month for Women's March Women's Month. Let's see, we've covered a lot, and it's really great to have you here during the kickoff of Black History Month at MAPS. I think uplifting intergenerational and intersectionalities to all the different components that we face as Muslims, as African American Muslims during this month, and providing the space for that is definitely needed and long overdue. So we thank you for having you here. We've got about 15 more minutes. I was gonna ask, does anyone have any questions? Anyone who's joining us for the young Sheikha, hopefully, Sabreen. I see that there is a comment saying, Sabreen, you are amazing. Just checking here. And also just to mention that Sabreen is one of our discussion panelists for the Malcolm X Alex Haley book club on Saturdays as well. If you want to join in there, you can hear more from the Miss Sabreen. And I think this week we're talking about Malcolm X transition through the Nation of Islam. So feel free to join us there. And then every Friday, right here on the MAPS Facebook Live with MCOC, share your stories and storytelling as we kind of kick off Black History Month. So last question. I know you are a, so we have a question here. What do you feel drawn to as you mature towards adulthood?
Um, a lot, to be honest. It kind of depends. There's so many amazing things that I want to work in. Right now, I just want to get into college. That's the number one thing. I'm just waiting for those letters, and from there, I want to continue my organizing work, but also move more into academia, um, conducting research on um, conducting research on the climate crisis, conducting research on American Muslims, on the Black American experience, on the propaganda and media that we see all the time. I'd like to take a little time during college to really dive into the academia of it all, and then eventually get a law degree, and then hopefully one day, inshallah, get a PhD. And become a practicing lawyer and hopefully be able to do research in whichever field I decide to go into. Right now, I'm kind of in between immigration, criminal justice, and environmental justice, but we got time, so we're just gonna
You do keep those
take the
options
time.
open. I was going to ask you, as you're leaving high school, any advice for the youth out there, kind of going through finding their identities and communicating, with parents, is one question. And then the other is, do you have any advice for parents raising young Black girls or young Black children in America today?
So the first question, you aren't supposed to have everything figured out. I know a lot of the time it feels like you are, especially if you're going into high school or middle school. And people are like, oh, what do you want to do with your life? What's your favorite subject? Do you want to become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher? And it feels like you're supposed to have everything figured out. You are absolutely not supposed to have everything figured out. Right now, try and figure out what you love and pursue that. I know one thing for me, I felt like I had to organizing everything, and my friends, we talk about this all the time. We felt we had to just rack up all the brownie points and all the organizations for college apps to get into the best school, or to just like to have like to the feeling of being in all these amazing groups, being able to work with them when in reality we didn't really care that much about them. They're doing great work, but it wasn't what we were passionate about. So making sure that you explore what you love. It can be art, it can be science, it can be music, it can be literature, it can be sports, anything. Just trying to figure out what you really enjoy and do what you can to fulfill whatever needs you have within that. Um, and then let everything else just find its place. You don't need to be able to define who you are right now. I saw this quote, I forgot who was written by, but your life, just keep on adding semicolons to them. It's just, you're going to keep on growing. You're not supposed to figure out who you are. There's never going to be one point in your life where you know who you are 100%, because the next day you could discover something new about yourself that you love, or figure out an old habit that you didn't like that much, so you're just trying to let go of. You'll learn from people and from your dean, your religion. You'll learn from your friends, you'll learn from your parents new and amazing things that can't really be fit into a box, and you aren't supposed to be fit into a box. Your story is completely authentic to you, and so whatever you feel you are, just enjoy it and learn, and never shut yourself off from the idea that you can become more than you are in your moment right now. So I guess that'd be like my advice to people who are just in high school or middle school, or trying to grow up in elementary school. Girl, just have fun, like just run around just run around, enjoy yourself,
Right.
do what you can.
I like the
um
mastering of the reinventing yourself,
yeah.
and reintroducing yourself. And yeah, the other question is like, what advice do you give, to parents raising young Black children and youth, especially our girls?
If you are raising your children in an area where there aren't other young Black Muslim girls, or just young Black girls in general around you, make sure and help them find spaces where they can find those older sisters or
Mhm.
those friends. Um, I know personally, if I didn't have MAPS Youth, if I didn't have MAPS in general, I wouldn't be as close to my dean, or I wouldn't be as close to understanding my blackness as I am today, because I had those people who I could rely on. I could, like, to this, like, I had like Duha and Aya read my college apps 20 times because I felt like they were my sisters. I could ask them, I could reach out to them, which you should do. Um, we're an ummah, we're a community together, so we should always feel like we can reach out to each other when we need the help. But
Mhm.
if there aren't other young black girls around your child, please make sure and find spaces where they could find other young girls around them, because the experience of being a black girl, especially in a predominantly non-black area, um, can be traumatizing when you feel like you're the only person experiencing the things
Mhm.
that you are,
Yes.
when you feel like you're the only one getting asked questions about whether or not your hair is real, or if you have lipo in your lips, not lipo, sorry, fillers in your lips. um
You're sucking on the bottle.
exactly, like
Yeah.
it can be very hard because you also feel the need to be a person that you aren't always, to make other people believe that you are everything stereotypes tell you that you aren't everything stereotypes tell you that a black person is. um
Mhm.
so yeah, like your child, like if you want, I'd love to be a resource for young black girls in the community. My friends would love to be resources for young black girls in the community. My older sisters would love to be there for your children as older sisters in the black community. So trying to find those spaces for them, um so that they can feel welcome and they do feel like they aren't being the world isn't charging at them so fast that they can
Right.
barely breathe, because they have other people there for them who understand what they're going through to an extent, because of course your story is your own, so it's not going to be the same as everybody else's.
Right. Was that one of the reasons that encouraged you to speak up for young Black women, or was there something in particular that was just like, you felt the need to really reach out and encourage you to speak up for young Black women?
I think the main thing was that I felt like there wasn't enough black people or just older sisters in general that I could reach
Mm-hmm.
out to. I had my cousins, which was great, but they lived across the country. So um, it wasn't the same, especially in middle school, where I feel a lot of it just feels like it's rushing at you really fast. Um, but when I did find those people I could talk to, it was so refreshing that I want to make sure that we just have more people, young girls who feel like they can reach out to an older sister, um, who, like, we can't promise we're always going to understand everything you're going through, and we can't promise that we'll be able to help every single thing you're going through, that we'll try our best,
Right.
um, in making you feel comfortable and welcome, and making sure you find some form of community. Um, if especially if you feel like you're lacking that, or that you just don't feel any connection to the community, we want to make sure that you have that, whether it be in your dean or being black or whatever ethnicity you come from. We want to make sure that we're there for you, and that you feel like you can come to the masjid and you can be a part of the community in any shape or form that may be for you.
Alhamdulillah. That's awesome. No, definitely having spaces like this, story time, having you guys come on, really connecting, and doing that youth-led work is really going to be, beneficial, I believe, to the next generation. Not just hearing it from us, but also you all as well, because they're going to feel more connected to you than, or what they say, back in your day, and just really relate things to, present day and time. So we appreciate that. Um, I think that's all the questions we have for the night. I really appreciate you and thank you for sharing your story and your lived experience, here in Washington as a Black young Muslima who's about to, go through adulting in this world, and hopefully, you find more support and, more avenues of respite, to where you don't have this all on your own. Um, and we could continue to build the community. So I'd like to thank you, and hopefully we'll see you all next week, right here at MCOC's Share Our Stories. We will be highlighting the African American Literacy League throughout this month. Next week, we have Noni Irving with us, who will be reading her story and sharing the hot seat today, as Sabreen did, and we look forward to it. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.